The following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network. Welcome to Uncanceled with Drake Wuertz, where we put God, family, and country first and challenge the woke cancel culture one episode at a time. Now, please welcome the host of the show, Drake Wuertz, and Rad Rob Francois.
Hey guys, welcome back to Uncanceled with Drake Wuertz. I am your host, Rad Rob Francois. We hope everybody's doing well all around the world. We thank you for being here each and every week. As always, I am joined by the one and only, the man with the plan. He is running for the Florida House out of District 30. It is Mr. Drake Wuertz. Good evening, sir. How are you, buddy?
Man, I am incredibly blessed, Rad Rob, here on this second week of the year of our Lord 2022. I hope you're doing great over there in Tennessee. We have a very, very special episode this week, my friend. Are you excited, Rob?
I'm absolutely excited because I've been looking forward to talk to this gentleman for quite a while now. So why don't you introduce me as your friend? Let everybody know who we got on the show.
Absolutely. Everybody out there, all of our Uncanceled podcast listeners, viewers, we are absolutely honored and pleased to have a special guest this week on the Uncanceled podcast, a friend of mine, a brother in Christ, a fellow candidate. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, please welcome Dr. Willie J. Montague. He is a candidate for United States Congress in Florida's 10th Congressional District. I look forward to him flipping that seat. Willie Montague, my brother, welcome to the Uncanceled podcast.
Hey, thank you, Rad Rob and Drake. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be up here. I've always loved the opportunity to share about what's going on first, giving honor to Christ, and then also what's happening in our country.
Amen. Hey, I appreciate you taking the time to be on here. I mean, as a campaign, as a fellow candidate at the state level, I know how much time it takes. I couldn't imagine at the federal level just how nonstop you got to be going. And so we truly appreciate you taking the time to be out here. Willie, hey, first off, for the folks that may not know you, because there are a lot of folks on here that, maybe from the wrestling background or may not be in tune with what's going on in Florida politics. Willie, tell the folks who you are, where you grew up, a little bit about your background, how you came to know the Lord, and eventually what's compelled you to have this crazy idea to run for Congress.
Absolutely. Well, I was born and raised in a small town called Morehead City, North Carolina. And I grew up in a family that has a spiritual background. We grew up in a Baptist church. And I found myself really journeying through just loving going to church. I wasn't too fond at that time of necessarily the preaching because I liked to hear the music because I was young. But as I got older, I started realizing that was actually the call that was upon my life, was ministry first and foremost. And I set out to just get involved. I started off as a junior deacon. I moved up and, of course, ushering and in the choir and so forth like that. And then in 2007, I moved. And I moved.
Did the rapture happen and nobody told us?
In 2007, I moved to Oklahoma to attend Bible college. And from there, that's when I really knew that the call of ministry was upon my life. I've had many experiences, ups and downs, absent father, brother incarcerated, going through drugs. But I don't remember a time when I wasn't finding myself really searching to know more of who God was, even though my family was in church. They really didn't have the answers that I needed because of the type of background that we grew up in. It was kind of more like a routine to go to church. And so I knew I had to seek more revelation.
You're just checking the boxes, right?
Right. Who is God and what is the relationship that I need to have with him? And that's when that journey expanded, when I left, graduated from high school and went to Bible college in Oklahoma. And then from there, I went on a missions trip to India. And what really spiraled what I'm doing today is when I started working with youth and young adults, which is something that I really did not want to do. Because I grew up around, they always call me an old soul. So because I grew up around people who were older, I just never thought I would be able to really witness, minister, coach, develop young people, because I thought, hey, I was bullied in school, so no way in the world they're going to listen to me now. But the Lord got a hold of me, and I realized that was actually my call, and God opened up a door for me where I was able to bring in youth and young adults and young men to come into my home in Oklahoma, and we was able to cultivate and develop there, of course, alongside of the ministry. And then in 2010, and I back up, I've always been involved with politics. I say that when I was 14 is when I learned about the Republican Party and how to engage in conservative ideals and not be stuck, as we like to say, on the Democrat plantation. And even though my entire family currently are Democrats, I was able to escape and at a young age, and I'm still in a place where I recognize that the Republican Party is the party for me under the conservative mindset and the constitutional mindset. And so from there, in 2010, I actually founded the Black Republicans Association, which worked where the 1921 race riot took place in Tulsa. And we started engaging in the Black community with conservative principles and information. And then in 2012, we really started working what we now have as the House of Timothy, which we officially got incorporated here in the state of Florida in 2015. And so that's a little snippet of my journey from ministry, politics, and I actually ran for city council when I was 23 in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, where I lived.
Wow.
And that was a journey that was interesting because we spent about $1 a vote. We got 1,300 votes. The opponent, who was her brother, actually passed away, and she wanted to take that seat. And of course, you know how politics works. It's kind of like it was handed to her.
You're right on it.
It was handed to her, but nonetheless, she got like 2,300 votes. I got 1,300. I'm 23 years old. When I looked at it, we spent $1,300, so $1 a vote. And so I looked at it as an opportunity that I knew that I was going to be called to hold some type of a seat. And so I continued to work in the community. I continued to go around and travel and speak from Tea Party events to homes or whatever. And then in 2020, was it 2020? Yeah, 2020, I dived into the congressional race that I'm currently in. I did not win the primary in 2020, but I made a promise to the Lord that this was a call that I had on my life, and I was not going to stop. So August 19th, the day after the primary, I jumped back in for 2022, back in 2020, and I've been going ever since to make sure that we flip Orange County, which is considered a blue district, but it can be won, and we need to really bring the restoration of Christ and his principles back to Orange County.
Let me ask you this, Willie. Do you think the tide is turning regards to next year with the way that everything's been handled by the current administration in Washington? Do you sense that a lot of people are kind of fed up and tired with what's going on?
Yeah, on both sides. Honestly, what I'm seeing is on Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, I have a mixture on my page as well as different groups that I follow. And the responses are the same, that this current administration is very destructive to the constitutional principles that our country was founded upon. And I believe that anyone that is like true to themselves and their morals will recognize that this is not the administration we want to represent us. Not even the next 3 years. We don't. Not even going into 2024. We don't even want them to even continue for the next 3 years because it's so destructive to our economy, to the quality of life, to the nuclear family. Everything that the Biden administration touches has failed, and we're seeing it with everything that's around us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, when Rob and I first started this podcast back in, July or August, and we were talking about the tyrannical regime of Joe Biden and his entire administration. Each week that we'd bring some up, we're like, oh man, it's only been 8 months. It's only been 9 months. Like, it's hard to believe it's only been a year. Well, not even. He was inaugurated on January 20th. As we're sitting here today, it's January 9th. It hasn't even been a year of this. And you know, it's funny, Willie, with the Democrats, you know, they control the executive and the legislative branches. And you would think that they're the underdogs because they're just pushing radical legislation because they know the tide is turning. They know they do not have, if elections are free and fair, they do not have a snowball's chance, and you know what, of winning the House or the Senate in 2022. Willie, I want to backtrack just a little bit. You know, something that Rob and I talk about here because, you know, we blend, you know, we talk about Jesus, we talk about politics, we talk about pro wrestling, a little bit of the current issues that's going on, is that relationship with Christ, where it's not about necessarily the religious aspect, but about having that relationship with Christ. And you talked about that as you were sharing your story and your testimony about how you develop your relationship with Christ. And to me, that is just so important for a new believer to really know that difference when they're coming to know the Lord. But as we intertwine that with where we're at currently, Willie, you know, you and I both, I know the answer that I give people, but I want to be curious. I'm curious as to what you tell folks when they say, "Hey, Dr. Willie, you know, like, we're Christians. We don't need to get mixed up in politics. Let's just share the gospel. Let's just preach the gospel. Just stay within our four walls. Just let go and let God, brother." What do you say? What do you say to that about us needing to get engaged in the culture?
Right. Well, I'll say this, that, you know, politics is going to involve itself in everything that we do, even if we don't want politics to get involved. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that as far as the church and the closure of churches during this pandemic. And we're seeing that when we're dealing with our schools. We're seeing that when we're dealing with the workforce in the private sector. So politics is involved regardless. And I believe that as those who are believers in Christ, that we do have an obligation to get involved in these things, because what it does, it allows us to be able to bring Christ into places that often people wouldn't be afraid to bring him. If we're supposed to be a witness of Christ in every aspect, and, you know, the scripture talks about, you know, in Judea and in Samaria and the uttermost parts of the world. Well, in that, it was talking about the different areas where geographically. And as we look at it now, here we have an opportunity to be a witness of Christ everywhere that we go. And politics is not exempt because of the fact that it's government, it's politics. And everywhere I go to speak, if I have longer than 2 minutes to speak, that I normally use a scripture reference to tie into my speech, because I believe that's my opportunity to shed the light of who Christ is, even if you're talking about something that is politics. So I believe that if we're going to see politics, which we're not going to get rid of it, use it as an opportunity to witness. Let people see your life. Let people see that just because I'm a candidate and I'm a Christian too, doesn't mean that I have to be a crooked politician. You know, I can exemplify the works of Christ wherever I go. I can do what is morally correct. I can make sure that I'm a husband of one wife and I'm taking care of my children. I'm not all over the place. That is what we have to do, restore those principles back into politics, not just get away from it because it's so crooked and so bad. We have to bring restoration. And so that's what I tell, the long version of what I tell people is that we have to get involved, because to me, it's part of our duty to be a witness of Christ.
Yes.
And one thing, Willie, this country was founded on faith by our forefathers. And if we had more leaders like them, like you, like Drake, that would implement their faith and, like you said, be a witness to people and let your light shine, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in right now. If more leaders would have stepped up, and it just hasn't been that case, because, like you said, a lot of them are crooked, a lot of them have their own agenda, a lot of them are bought and paid for. Satan has a hold of most of them, but we need more strong Christian leaders in places of power. Sorry. To let people know that we're on the right track. That's why I love guys like you and Drake, because you're humble, you're not fake. People can see that you're absolutely genuine and honest. Whereas most people wouldn't even trust a typical politician as far as they could throw him. We need more guys like you two, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's, a big reason why we kind of got in the mess that we've been in the past couple of years is because so many churches and Christians that just sat on the sidelines. They were so afraid of sharing the truth that they were afraid of offending people.
Great point.
But the gospel at its core, it's offensive. It's divisive. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. We share the truth in love, absolutely, but we have to share the truth. And the righteous are bold as a lion. And look, this is where we got in the mess with the public school system, while they're pushing radical sex education. Who would have ever thought that under the threat of a virus that has a 99% survival rate, that churches would close their doors and just, degrade themselves than doing a live stream on YouTube just because it's more convenient, or the silence of a majority of the church in the abortion holocaust that we're living in. That truly tells the tale. So I truly think now, 2022. I've said it here before. It's the year for the outside of the box Christian conservative,
Yes.
Young candidates to roll up their sleeves, get in the game, get engaged, and just go for it. Run for off and just give it all you got. You know what I mean? The duty is ours. The results, those belong to God. But it is, like Dr. Willie said, it's our duty to make sure that we're doing all that we can to be good biblical citizens in this day and age.
Amen.
Yeah. It's cool that, speaking of the mess of 2020, that's actually when I met Dr. Willie. In Rad Rob, I'm sure you've had similar instances like this where, the COVID and the pandemic and everything, it kind of just, you were able to forge these relationships with other freedom-loving people. I was mutual friends with people that were posting about Willie on Facebook in the middle of 2020, and I met him at an anti-mask protest. You know what I mean? and then right in the midst of the summer of 2020, where BLM Incorporated and Antifa, they were threatening, violence in Florida. You know what I mean? Against us. We weren't going to have that. What happened in other cities happened here. Willie was right there, a congressional candidate right there, holding the line. And I was like, wow, this guy has guts. I was like, man, this guy's cool. And he's bringing the word of God. And like, man, in the middle of 2020, it was pretty cool to find a community of people that were like standing for Christ and standing for righteousness and defying any kind of tyrannical regimes. And Willie made and I love that whatever happened in the primary results last year, that didn't deter you, and you just you use that as motivation, and you didn't slow down. In fact, it might have motivated you even more. But yeah, man, you were just truly a salt and light in 2020. I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this to piggyback off of that, Willie. Have you gotten a lot of flack from other black people for you being a conservative, or have anybody called you Uncle Tom, or how much blowback have you gotten from your beliefs and your morals?
I'm laughing because I can give you probably like a book. I get it's a lot of flack, and it doesn't bother me anymore. I'm going to be 100% honest. Last year, technically 2020, can't say last year because of 2021. Right. Okay, so 2020. During that time, everything that when I posted stuff, my whole mindset was I wanted to go out there, just encourage people, empower people, let people know what we need to do. And everything that I did, I was like, I didn't want to get people upset. I was whatever. And then I started getting to the place where I recognized that we have to tell the truth, but the absolute truth, and we can't sit there and try to smooth it over so it can fit people's ears, the itching ears. And so from 2020 to 2021, the whole entire 2021 is when I really saw that people didn't recognize how much deception was around them until I started posting certain things and started putting articles up and started going and speaking at different events and showing, from Uncle Tom to, I've got the black face of white supremacy to Coon to, I've been called a racist. Just the things that I can tell you of all the, even to a voicemail that I got the other day that they prayed nothing but horrible things would happen to me. So it is definitely some clap back. But what I recognize with that is that one, it lets me know that I'm going in the right direction because truth always prevails over lies. But the second part to that is I also recognize just how lost a nation is because of the temperament of people. It is not because of what is said, it's because the ego and the pride that the enemy has so instilled in their hearts, they're unable to recognize truth. And because it's coming from someone that, happens to be a Republican, that's an issue. And then, if I'm black, that's another issue, and then if I'm a man, that's going to be another issue. So, and then don't throw in the pastor part because now I'm a religious nut job. So
man, they just got all kind of bullets.
Yeah, so it's like the list goes on. But one thing I recognize is that as long as we live and are representatives of Jesus Christ, we are going to face persecution because that is part of our duty. That's what I believe. It's part of our duty to go through that because none of us is going to be hung on a cross. Well, I pray with none of us.
Yeah. Hey, let's not forget, Willie, some more ammunition of the left and the establishment right and those, hypocrites that call you all these racist, awful things. Let's not forget you're an open Trump supporter as well.
Yes,
you know what I mean? So that's just more fuel in the fire.
Yeah, so that definitely caused between the conversation about ending human trafficking. Even when I say abolish abortion, those things just carry a extreme level of weight, and then anger comes right after it. But one thing that I say, as I was saying, is that I know that this is the time to speak the truth. 2022 is the year, as Drake mentioned, for people who are we need a new generation of people that are not going to toe the line. They have a spine, they have a backbone. They're going to say what they mean. They're going to mean what they say. And no matter what, as it is behind you that says, we the people. And that's why I'm firmly believing on that. This is what we got to get back to. Is we the people that are going to represent and stand up for this nation and God, because he is the one that's the foundation.
That's true. Yeah, it's not the lobbyists that run Tallahassee. It's not the lobbyists that are supposed to run DC. It is government by consent of the governed, which is how our founders framed this great nation. And I love just your strong stance. And, part of this, like I said, we push back against the woke cancel culture one episode at a time. Everybody knows my story, my career in pro wrestling. People tried to have me canceled for being a Christian conservative, and heaven forbid I stand up for children that are being forced to wear muzzles on their face for 8 hours a day, or I stand up for the unborn child. But what I love about Willie, Rad Rob, and everybody, all the listeners out there in the Uncanceled podcast, no matter what is going on, he is there, and he is there in person throughout the entire school board battle of trying to get these masks off these kids. And now we're continuing to fight against shreds of critical race theory that are being pushed in Florida schools. Willie is there at the school board meetings, even in districts where he's not running. It doesn't benefit him politically. Yeah. He's come to Seminole County. He's gone over to Lake County. He's there because he just wants to help people, because he's a good Christian brother, and he wants to be there and be the voice for the voiceless. And we know, as there's strength in numbers. And so Willie wants to contribute to that, whether it's, fighting against the tyrannical regimes of these different city commissions and this vaccine tyranny and COVID tyranny, or being, sharing the gospel right in front of the gates of hell at abortion clinics in Florida. Willie is right there. And so he's a genuine candidate, a genuine man. And that speaks volumes when people see, somebody that's running for office, for a big federal office. They're actually, boots on the ground out there, walking the walk and talking the talk.
Thank you.
And there's not a lot of people that do that. I mean, quite honestly. But I am kind of hopeful with some of the special elections that we had a couple of months ago.
Virginia.
Where some seats were turned over. I'm hopeful for this year that more people will wake up and realize they don't like what's going on, and we'll turn those seats and we get the House and the Senate back. God forbid something happens, Willie, and you don't happen to win this year. Do you have a backup plan?
Oh, I'm going to continue to serve the community because my organization, is dedicated to helping to cultivate youth and young adult men. And so that's what I'm going to continue. I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. And in fact, part of our plan for 2022 is to really launch out all those things that I kind of laid dormant during me running for office. So I'm going to just continue to be out there and get involved as much as possible. So that'll be me.
That's good.
Yeah. Before he ran for office, he was defying tyrants and sharing the gospel. I'm pretty sure he's going to continue doing it no matter what. Willie, Rob, as we sit here in January, it's a big, important month. One of the themes of this month, it is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Obviously, on my campaign at the state level, that's a very big issue with legislation and things that I want to pass to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can as a state to end human trafficking and child sex trafficking here in Florida. Federal level, it's a whole nother can of worms. But that's something that has been on Willie's heart. He's been on the front lines, fighting human trafficking and helping, victims that have gotten out of that lifestyle. Willie, right now where we're at with everything that happened with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and, documents being sealed and us not knowing the names of who's involved in all this. Willie, why do you think human trafficking and specifically, child sex trafficking, why do you think it's not talked about more?
My honest opinion with that is I feel like when if something can't be discussed as serious as that, there's a lot of things that are hidden. And there's a lot of people who are hiding them that are involved, and they do not want the covers to come off. And this is why we have to, turn up the notch on, one, our prayer that God will expose these individuals. And then two, we have to continue, as you and I, Drake, in our platforms with campaigning, we have to continue to let that be spoken of. And to be honest, it is a disheartening to me when I go to certain events and see other candidates and that live in the state of Florida, and some that are right in the areas where it is high levels of sex and human trafficking, and there's
real quick, Orange County, where's that rank regionally?
Orange County is number 2 in the region, and Orlando is number 3 among the cities in the United States. And of course, Florida overall is number 3, and the numbers are not decreasing. In fact, we're seeing the increase because of the mask. And a lot of it, actually, I seen a poster up, and the last picture they had of the young girl was in a mask. So, it's to me, we have human trafficking task force, and some of them are great. We do not have as many sheriff departments that get involved as they should. And then we definitely do not have legislators that are getting involved. What we really should have is more engagement from our churches that are really starting to educate their congregation on how to look at the signs for human trafficking, especially when it deals with these kids. And now, if you're looking at some of these schools, whether it's in Florida or whatever, some of these schools are starting to go back to when they're having the kids back in the homes. And that was the issue, because so many of these apps, the parents have to go to school, and, they may leave them there with a computer, or they're downstairs and the kids upstairs, and they got all these different apps and ways where they go. And so I just feel like we just really have to take the initiative.
Opens the door for grooming.
Yes, we have to start opening up our eyes. And that's why I think it's not being discussed as much, because people, one, is afraid of what they don't know, two, because they're involved with it, and three, because people feel like it. I've seen people where they really do not think it exists. In fact, I was having this conversation with some of the guys that I was mentoring. I was like, hey, you need to watch out for this and that. And he was like, wait, he said, human trafficking is real? And I was like, yeah, it's real. I was like, yes, it's real. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. I was like, yeah, this is not a CSI television show. This is actually real life. Yeah. And we have to let people know that. But I am glad. One thing I can say, I'm glad to see more men that are rising up in these areas, such as helping to fight against human trafficking. Because for so long, you see, as we call them, the mama bears that are out there on the front line. And that just, this is now where we have to have the completeness of the nuclear family, and we have to defeat. That's a part of the counsel culture. They want to counsel men from every aspect of everything, from marriage to schools to home to life in general, because once the man is in the home, in the community, it brings structure. And one thing that the radical left and the counsel culture does not like is structure, because they're not able to control the narrative.
They hate traditional family values.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, growing up in a tough household like that, how were you able to pull yourself out of that? Because, a lot of black kids and growing up are not able to pull themselves out of that and kind of follow what they see on the streets, or they get into gangs, or they start selling drugs. How were you able to stay away from all that growing up?
I really think it was because between my mother, grandmother, and aunt, and just the fact that I just really, really stayed involved. In fact, my mother, you know how you call your parent calls someone and say, "Hey, is they over at so and so house?" My mother would call to the church and would say, "Is Josh over at the church?" My middle name is Josh, and that's where I was at. I was over at the church helping one of the deacons clean the church up, and so I think that is really what grounded me. Is that I was brought up in church, and it kept me this is just all that I know. Like I said, of course, there was ups and downs and things like that. I had a lot of healing, learning, with the absence of a father, learning how to come through that, and then learning how to, cope with anger and things that, the bitter things that come on the inside. Yeah. But I believe that when God opened the door for me to be able to do the House of Timothy like I have now, I believe it was for me to be to other young men what I did not have. And that's why I most of everything that I do is just for that purpose, is that forget about me. I want others to experience things that I know if they feel the way I felt at that time of their life, that they're hurting, they're angry, and they're waiting for someone to come to their rescue to teach them. And so that is what keeps me escaping from the world of I had this kind of trauma, I had that kind of trauma. Because trauma to me ends up being a testimony if you really want to come out of it. And
not play the victim card, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, do you think the absence of strong fathers, especially within, black teens, is what leads them down, horrible paths, because they don't have, like we say, the nuclear family, the tight-knit, strong mother and father? Do you think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, their fathers ran away, or they don't know who they are? Do you think that plays into a lot of what happens to kids that get into the wrong things?
Yeah, that is definitely a part of it, especially within some black communities. They do have uncles and they do have cousins and things like that. But what I do recognize that the most part that causes that path that go into the wrong direction is the lack of community. Mm-hmm. One thing that I see that happens often, especially, and it could be every community, but because I know what I say this is every community, but I'm saying for what I've noticed in black communities is that the community, for example, when I wanted to do a project back home, I went around and asked everybody hey, can you chip in $20 for my mom's friend, this person, that person. And everybody was like, "Oh yeah, well, when I get paid, and I ain't got $20 now, I'm talking about $20."
Yeah.
But when I would go over to the community where there was businesses and owners, and not the black community, go over, they had no problem chipping in. They saw the vision, and that is one thing that I would say for the black community is that, and I've shared this time and time again. I want to share this. We were separated by a railroad track. On the other side was called the Promised Land. Then you had the black community. And I've always shared that when I walked over there, I saw opportunity. I saw businesses, brick roads, palm trees. And then when I came back to our side, I recognized that was not there. But I also recognized it had nothing to do with the color of my skin. Mm-hmm. It had everything to do with the fact that our mindset was in a victim mindset. And we felt like we were handed a bad deck of cards, and that we couldn't achieve, we couldn't be educated, we couldn't buy, we couldn't sell, we couldn't own, we couldn't have. And that's when I realized that the only way to change that is through community. And we tried that one time back in my hometown, trying to help them with that. But the community got so divided because everybody saw something in their own light. And this is why it's important for anyone that's listening that want to get involved in helping, with getting the message, conservative message, getting into the Black community, is always recognize everybody has a story. We have to get back to telling our story. What did we come out of? And how do we become better than where we were and get out of the struggle mentality? And I believe that fathers and father figures are very important. And it doesn't matter what age. I have a son that is 25 years old that I adopted through my program when he was 19. And everybody had Florida is an adult adoption state, by the way. And so everyone's like, why would you adopt someone that's 19? And then I started explaining to them, think about how many youth and young men are in the foster care and adoption programs. You know how many people go and adopt little kids, toddlers, and those that are right there at 10 and 11. You don't see people go and adopt 16, 17, or 15-year-olds because they figure, hey, in a couple of years they're going to be adults and they're not going to listen to me. Well, once those kids leave out of those programs, most of them end up on drugs. They end up on the street. They end up being trafficked. They end up getting into some trouble, and they end up not really knowing their identity because they felt like no one cared enough to adopt me. Yeah. So I recognize that we can change that. It doesn't always have to be someone that's an adult. So I adopted him at 19, and in that process of adopting him, I recognized that every young person deserves a forever home, and just that adoption alone and him being able to call me Pops started changing the trajectory of his life into where he started wanting to do better. He started calming down with his attitude. He started being able to do things that he thought all he was in one lane, and that everybody was against him. He just had to be angry and bitter. And so that's my personal story about how important it is to be a father or a father figure or a mentor or a coach in some young man's life or young woman's life, for that fact. And be able to encourage them that you're there, and be okay with them calling you dad or calling you pops or something like that. It doesn't have to be like, some people don't like that. I'm not like, no, let them call you what they see you as, so until they're able to grow and develop. So
and that's why mentorship programs and they are so vital and important. I grew up in the trailer park. My parents were divorced, and I got to surround myself with some good solid people to guide me. And, I was blessed to have a wonderful career, and God's blessed me here. But, the being around other young men and showing them that biblical masculinity and showing them that leadership, it is so vital. You can't put a price tag on it. And so, I love what you're doing with the youth and adopting a son like that just takes a lot of bravery, and I just truly commend you for that. But man, it is true. The left, the cancel culture, they want to divide family. They want to push fathers out of the homes. They want to attack, biblical marriage. And so I think it's important that we are uncompromising in the truth that we stand on in this day and age.
They also want to redefine genders as well, which is ridiculous. Yeah. Who do you identify as? What do you identify as? Letting kids choose what gender they want to be. Dude, my kid, I can't even get my kid to wear the pair of shoes I want her to wear, let alone decide if she wants to be a boy or a girl or non-binary or whatever any of that is. It's just a strange time that we're in. And all you got to do is go on TikTok and see how screwed this country is right now. When you watch all the crazy people that are out there, just mental health is a big part of what's going on today, or lack of mental health. Go ahead. How do we solve that problem, Drake? I mean, how do we get, even with the shootings, it's just, mental health issues are what's driving, most of your issues today, as well as Satan, obviously. But it's something that I don't think has been addressed by enough people.
Yeah, well, I think sharing the love of Christ, from an early age, and a genuine love of Christ, that's going to help deter a lot of that. But look, a lot of that is because, fathers are driven out of the homes. They're incentivized not to have dads in the house, or men aren't taking responsibility for these children that they're bringing into the world, and a lack of a lack of parental skills where kids, like Willie said earlier, they're on these apps or they're on TikTok or whatever, and that's how they're being brought up. They're being raised by social media rather than being raised by their parents and spending time at the dinner table. And look, from the political side, as conservatives, as Republicans, but first and foremost as Christians and disciples of Christ, where we're at now in 2022, we can't try to find common ground with the Democrats. We can't try to find common ground with these socialists. Why would we try to seek compromise with a party that wants to redefine gender and say that there's 57 genders, that a party that wants to, make pedophilia a protected sexual class, a party that wants to, that is unleashed an all-out assault on the unborn child, and a party that wants to force you to take a vaccine. You know what I mean? So why would we try to seek compromise with that? So, we have to hold the line, and we got to stand firm.
It's January 9th as we're recording this. I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that January is the 1-year anniversary of the insurrection that happened last year, and how the current administration is framing the narrative. I have a quick minute or so clip I want to play for you guys, and then we'll get your thoughts on it.
Or our Constitution.
There we go.
Last year's riot to Pearl Harbor and the 9/11 terror attacks.
Dates echo throughout history. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001. And January 6th, 2021.
Wow.
Many calling that bold comparison an insult to the victims and their families.
So, what is wrong with Kamala Harris? Seriously,
the big insurrection where they walked in between the velvet ropes
and took selfies with everybody, and
it's insulting that she compared that to 9/11 to Pearl Harbor. Absolutely insulting. Were there bad apples in that crowd? Yes, absolutely. But also there are a lot of factors that they are not talking about, that they are not exposing, to where a lot of this was set up. And in the timeline in and of itself, if you look at the timestamps of when President Trump was still speaking, the Capitol had already been breached at that point.
Yeah.
This wasn't a big insurrection that was caused by President Trump. And beyond that, where we're at a year later, there are nonviolent offenders, many of whom are veterans or former police officers, family men who are still being held in awful conditions, awaiting trial, haven't seen their families, in solitary confinement. Here in Florida, Willie and I know quite a few, of them with mutual friends. But meanwhile, the summer of 2020, all the looters and rioters that, Kamala Harris tweeted about raising money for their bail. What about when, Justice Kavanaugh was being sworn in and the insurrection that happened inside the Capitol there? You know what I mean? Like, it's just the hypocrisy of the left. When Trump was sworn in, there was cars that were set on fire in Washington, D.C. You know what I mean? So it just goes back to the hypocrisy of the left, just to magnify this, to comparing it to 9/11 and to Pearl Harbor. I'm interested to get Willie's thoughts.
Yeah, does that make you sick to hear Kamala say that, Willie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, pretty much everything she says. But I would say this: I definitely know it was not an insurrection. I do know that there, as Drake mentioned, of course, with anything that is done in mass numbers, you can be sure that there's going to be individuals that act outside of the character that others are acting in, but that does not account for the thousands upon thousands of people who felt like that their vote was not counted properly, and that there was some injustice that was done. A lot of the people that was out there on January 6th was standing out there because that was their First Amendment right to do so. and they were not out there because they wanted to be destructive to government property. And as many have stated before, anyone that did something that was illegal, of course, those individuals should be held accountable according to the law. But that does not account for the thousands of individuals that were out there doing the right thing. And it also is disrespectful and a slap in the face to the millions of other patriots who are now being labeled as domestic terrorists because we happen to support President Trump, and because we stand behind the MAGA movement, and because we continue to stand up for our country and that we want to save America. So I really believe that her remarks, and liken it to Pearl Harbor and liken it to what happened during 9/11, it just shows just how out of touch she is with reality, and how she continues to play into the division that is already spiraling out of control in America, between her and Biden and all the other radical left elected officials that continue to allow for the hate to divide this nation. And every time they do a press conference, is never about how to unify. It's only about, bad Republicans, horrible Republicans. And that was not the promise that was made by Biden when he was running, that he was going to unify the nation. And in fact, one of his posts that he posted, I believe it was during January 6th or right after, was basically blaming President Trump and putting the blame on him when it dealt with the talking about election fraud. And so, it was all it is about going back and forth and trying to prove their point. So we know that Kamala Harris is
radical.
I just can't. Thank you. That's the word we use. She is really just out of control. And I don't know who writes her scripts for, but she needs another, screenwriter, because.
Well, you look at her history as the California AG, and she's just absolutely godless progressive policies that she tried to enforce and push. There has been so much footage that has come out from January 6th that showed that a lot of the people that were in there, they were affiliated with Antifa. This wasn't your typical, a lot of those people that were in there were not your typical middle class, MAGA people that were just there to peacefully and patriotically protest and just protest their government for a redress of grievances, as our First Amendment states us and allows us to do. A lot of these were planned actors, a lot of them that went in there. And heaven forbid, if you have any kind of questions about the 2020 election and the process or anything like that, they call you a right-wing conspiracy theorist. And that's almost like a badge of honor now, how many times you can get called that. So, but yeah, again, it's just awful how they've done this, and the January 6th committee that's in Congress and the task force and all this, and just labeling people as domestic terrorists just because, like Willie said, they support the MAGA movement, or they're Republican, or they support President Trump, or red flag laws that can then be called on upon that to then label them as a terrorist, to take away their guns. It continues to snowball and go on and on and on. Willie, as we're about to put a bow on this episode, all right, 2022 is upon us. Florida's 10th congressional district, U.S. District 10 here in Florida. Current Representative Val Demings, she's running for Senate. Her and her husband have pushed a micro-tyrant regime here in Central Florida. In D.C., she's voted right along with the squad, voted to impeach President Trump twice, radically pro-abortion, silent on human trafficking, just free, force over freedom, just the whole, she toes the Democrat Party line. There will be a new representative for House District 10. Lord willing, it is you. When you get to D.C., what can the folks in the Orlando, Orange County area and across the United States expect from you? And I ask you that because no matter where you live, whatever happens in Congress, it affects everybody. You know what I mean? That's what we need, more champions up there, more Marjorie Taylor Greens, more Byron Donalds, guys like that, representatives like that are not going to bend or bow to the establishment. But what can people expect from Dr. Willie Montague when he steps into the House chambers in Washington, D.C., in the middle of the swamp?
Well, the first thing is going to be accountability. We're going to have to get in there, and I've always shared this when people ask that question, and I said we got to get with other like-minded colleagues that are going to be in D.C. and find out a strategy. I believe that what happens so often with whether it's State House, State Senate, or U.S. House, U.S. Senate, is that people go in and they have their set things they need to do for their districts, and I agree with that. But what happens is I don't believe there's a coming together of like-mindedness. And if we can all come together and start having a conversation, as you mentioned, it's going to benefit the whole entire country, and get together and say, what is the plans that's going to help our sister states here, and how can we benefit from each other, and how can we pour into each other to make sure that we're not only going to save America, but as it is quoted, that we're going to keep America free and safe, and that is not going to come under this tyrannical government again once we be able to get in there. So that's the first thing. The next thing is to make sure that we are gaining focus in our community. So often people go to DC and they never return back to their districts. They have no clue what is taking place. And that is what you can expect, the accountability and making sure that we know what the community needs. What is the focus that's here in the community? Because often people look at things in the community as state issues, local issues. And I say this over and over, all politics is local, because the people who will vote for Drake are also the same people that have to go to the poll to vote for me. It's not a DC group. It's not a, this district. It's people that are in your community. And we have to get back to making sure that we are representing for the district and not getting swamped in, not getting, caught up in all of the fancy little things that go on in DC behind closed doors and the deals that are made. So it's one, going to be accountability, and two is going to be about really restoring the community, because I want to believe this 2022 is going to be the time when people are going to see who's really representing them. And it's not just going to begin on election day. It's going to start as we sing now, that people are fed up. And I'm seeing that even in our campaign. I know you sent it, Drake, where it's not the typical people that are waking up or that are on this, like before when it comes down to election. These are people who normally don't even pay attention to politics, who are waking up and they're getting involved. They're willing to knock doors. They're willing to make phone calls. They're willing to do whatever it takes to get new people in office. So I'm sending that strong warning out there to those who are listening, that is a new day in America. People are not the same. It's not going to be the same type of politics. And so out with the rhinos, out with the establishment. What we're getting ready to see come in are going to be true constitutional conservatives that have a spine. They're not just, they don't have a resume like this. They're just talking about what matters to the people, not what matters to the elites. So,
man, that is so in June of 2021, our Republican clubs, they've been flooded, with people, and it was an off year, flooded with people just coming in and getting involved. I do want to ask just one more thing before Rob wraps this up. Willie, recently you took a trip to Texas to the border, right in the midst of where, the immigration is flooding in, this border crisis that Biden has allowed to infiltrate our nation, where, the entry rate is up, 500%. Rates of human trafficking are up. Fentanyl being trafficked in, children being trafficked in, all the, illegals being flown to different states. Not to mention we're supposed to be containing this virus, but there's no COVID testing at the border. Willie, what did you see firsthand there at the border? And what, from your experience there, how can that motivate you to do your part to help fix this border crisis when you're elected into Congress?
Absolutely. Well, I was there with an organization that I'm actually a part of called Veterans for America First. And they have candidates that are veterans and also civilian candidates. And during this time we was there with Admiral Kubik, who was the one who personally built 135 miles of the wall. And during our time of being over there, we were seeing the people still working, but there were so many gaps in the walls that were over there that needed to be filled in to complete the wall. And then the thing that we saw that was disheartening to me was these wristbands. And I want to explain the wristbands because, of course, I've had the council call to try to debunk it. This was not Photoshop. This was wristbands that are used as commodity exchanges of the individuals coming from the Mexico side coming in over into the Texas side, but that's what they have to use to give to the cartels to be before they can just get in, because people think they're just coming in, they're having to get permission to access over to America via the cartel. So the cartel is running things. When we actually went into Mexico, and when we went into Mexico, we saw that these individuals were like wanting to shine shoes, do those things like that. Later on, we found out that a lot of the money that they're getting for shining our shoes when they see us come over there, because they get excited as Americans, is going to pay the traffickers. And so this is the stuff that is taking place right here at our border, and that our border needs to be secured, because not only is it a commodity with children being used as tokens to get back and forth, a lot of who these are not their parents. These are traffickers and cartels that are using these children and these women as instruments to get over to do their bidding, whether it's from drugs or trafficking. And then on top of that, what we saw was buses. We saw buses that were literally picking up the illegals and bringing them over. They were hiding them on the buses, ducking them down in the buses. These were 2 or 3 big white, buses that you see that we take if you want to go on a trip. Big white buses with dark tinted windows. And we had to ask, our interpreters to know what's going on. They was explaining to us what is taking place, because there was a gap. They were going over the part where the gap was and coming back over. And so we saw that. We saw the Border Patrol that was out there, which is not too much. Their hands are tied as well. And so this is the real deal that is taking place over there. And this is why we have to, this is not just a political statement. This is basically a national security statement. It's about securing our border for the protection of those who are over here, the American people. This is not about us trying to exile a group of people or trying to be racist to a group of people. This is about us saying that the same way that everyone else went through the process to become legal American citizens is the same way that everyone else needs to do that. Because with them coming over here, people don't realize that people are quick to hire. There's so many illegals that are working, that are coming in, that are taking the jobs of the hardworking Americans that need them. And so we need to secure our borders. We need to hold accountable those elected officials that are up there right now. And it needs to not just go away. It can't just be a Twitter post or an Instagram post. It needs to become real life. And so many people are like, well, why go down there? What can you do if you go to the border? We need to see. I would recommend anyone to go if you can. You'd have to see it. And when you see it, you recognize that it's serious and that something has to be done, because this is only the start. It is only going to grow more, especially with the current administration that we have. There is no excuse that our borders are not secured, and there's no excuse that we're seeing so much trafficking going on. And these people are coming into our country. Wrap it up with this. There was a video of one of the guys that I met over there. His name is Anthony. He does a lot of work over at the border and also helping with rescue when it deals with trafficking. And he was asking them, was recording them and asking them as they were coming, where are you going? And he was saying, of course, in Spanish, where are you going? And they had a piece of paper, and they had to look down because it listed what state they were getting ready to be sent to.
Wow.
Wisconsin. Here, we're going to here. So they literally have a piece of paper with the state. They're getting on this bus, and they're being shipped to whatever place that they're assigned to go. This is real. This is what's happening right here in America. And so the only way that we can bring change that I believe when we get to DC is to make sure that we get some legislation in place that we're going to be able to make sure this border is secure. We have to put fire. When we get there this next Congress, we're going to have to put fire under Biden's administration, because right now we have some great people that's there now, but we have to have a strong mass number to let them know. And the next thing I say, we're going to have to impeach him, and I would be more than glad to be part of signing my name to impeach Biden and make sure that him and Kamala gets out of office.
Amen to that, brother. That's very fascinating to learn what goes on there. Like you say, if people really went down there and learned firsthand and saw for themselves and stopped listening to the fake news media, maybe more people would do something about it. One thing before we wrap it up, just to ask you a follow-up on that. At what point does Governor Abbott need to take some responsibility for that? What kind of power does he have within his own state to try to curtail some of that?
I believe that he should be doing more. I see that they're trying to build their own wall. I saw where they put some things up they're trying to work on. I believe that should have came a little sooner. That's my personal thing with that, because when we went over there, that was a gap between the time we went till now. Yeah. And I believe that he should take more responsibility. And I say that even with their state legislators, they need to be able to be bolder to do these things. Like it doesn't take as much as people. I know when we're looking from the outside, we see people, they can't do it because they need these numbers. But if you cause enough ruckus, somebody's going to jump on your boat with you, because everybody say, hey, why aren't you doing what they're doing? Why are you not standing up like they're standing up? They're going to start holding accountable their representative if that's not their representative. And that's what I think that needs to happen in Texas and in Florida. It needs to be that these state legislators, they just need to have enough people to say, you're not doing enough like X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Because if you're doing what they're doing, we would see change. Like in Arizona, where they took a stand to actually bring more heat to those who are the predators when it deals with trafficking. Yep. Well, we need that here in Florida. And so, we should be leading.
I plan on filing that.
Huh?
I plan on filing that.
Thank you. See, there you go. Let's go. So it should be no excuse that, we're free in one area, which is when it deals with mandates, but the humans themselves are not free. That's a problem. And I'm not going to get on the whole thing. I'll let that go. Bring me back next time.
Yes, sir. For sure. We will definitely have you back to touch base. We absolutely appreciate you being here, Dr. Montague. Such a pleasure to talk to you. Such a treat. We do need more young leaders like you and Drake to get the rhinos out, to get the establishment out, and to get a new vision in all of our offices around the country, not just in D.C., not just in Florida, but really around the entire United States. Drake, where can we find you on social media, brother, and let everybody know what you got going on?
Yes, you can find me at my website is votedrake.com. You can subscribe to my newsletters. We got weekly email blasts going out, letting folks know what's going on. We're here in 2022. We are hitting the ground running each and every single night. I'm throwing on my suit and tie, going to some kind of event. I'm going to Tallahassee this week. I'm speaking at I'll be at the Seminole Republican Women Federated Club of Moms for Liberty. I'm speaking at the East Seminole Republican Club. Every Saturday or Sunday, we're out knocking doors in the community as well, just getting literature out to folks. Let them know they're going to have a guy on the inside in Tallahassee to fight for their God-given big R rights. You can find me on Facebook at Vote Drake Wuertz. You're more than welcome to request my personal Facebook page. I generally accept everybody unless you are a liberal leftist troll. Then you'll eventually be deleted. But I welcome you to friend me anyway. So that's where you can find me and what I got going on. I have some big announcements going on. I'm going to get with Dr. Willie off air here coming up soon. Some big events that are happening here in Florida. Not necessarily just about my campaign, but we're going to engage against the wicked culture that is trying to infiltrate our children in the school system with this sexual grooming. We're going to take a stand. And then obviously this month, Human Trafficking Awareness Month, Sanctity of Human Life Month. It's also School Choice Month. So all three of those things, very important to me at a state level, incredibly important to Dr. Willie at the federal level. Dr. Willie, where can people find you online?
All right.
What do you got going on? How can people support you? How can people donate to you? Because folks, we hate asking for money, but we need it to run for office.
Absolutely. TeamWillie.com. There's a donate button up there, or just TeamWillie.com/donate. If you type in Willie Montague or any social media platform, I should pop up. I do have a personal page, and you can find me there if I'm not full there. But Dr. Willie Montague is my Facebook page, and you can follow there. It's unlimited for there. You can find me as well as on Twitter. That's the most fun, at Rep Montague, already claimed it. And then on Instagram, Willie Montague. So those are the platforms we do.
They haven't permanently suspended you off Twitter yet.
No, they have not, because I'm a candidate. I'm going to use that. That's the bad. We got to use the being in Florida and a candidate. Yeah, we do have some events coming up, but just follow the social media platforms and you'll be able to see those events that are coming up in the weeks and the months to come. And I thank you both for the opportunity, and I look forward for us fighting for America together.
Hey, man, yeah, I highly suggest subscribing to Willie's e-blast as well. Always very informative, very well thought out. It's not just your typical Republican email blast newsletter where it's like, hey, I'm running for office. We got to flip this seat. Donate. He actually, puts some weight into the email. It's always a good read about what's going on, very thoughtful. And of course, he's sharing Christ in those weekly email blasts as well. So, Willie, love you, man, as a brother, as a friend, praying for you. We got some big things coming up together in 2022.
Yes.
Rad Rob, thank you for facilitating this. Willie is technically our first guest on the Uncanceled podcast.
Yes, he is. That's right.
Yeah. So very cool. So everybody that's just now joining us for because Dr. Willie's here and you may not be familiar with us, we invite you to subscribe to the Uncanceled podcast, where we push back against the woke cancel culture one episode at a time. We talk about Jesus, we talk about wrestling, we talk about politics, we tackle the issues of the day. Rad Rob, tell them how they can support the Uncanceled podcast.
You guys can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at uncanceledpod. You can send us an email to uncanceledpodcast@gmail.com. And if you do want to support the show on Patreon, it's patreon.com/uncanceled podcast. We appreciate everybody here each and every week. Dr. Montague, very nice to talk to you, sir. Thank you for coming on. We'll definitely have to get you on again in the future. And you. Mr. Wuertz, my good friend, it's such a treasure to talk to you each and every week, as well as we go on your journey to hopefully get into the Florida State or Florida House of Representatives in District 30, so you can make a change and get those rhinos out of there, because they've held those seats for way too long. We need to get some real change in here. But thank you both for being here, and we will see all of you back next week for another edition of the Uncanceled Podcast right here on the Rad Rob Radio Network. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Uncanceled with Drake Wuertz. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at uncancelledpod. You can also send us an email at uncancelledpodcast@gmail.com. You've been listening to Uncanceled with Drake Wuertz right here on the Rad Rob Radio Network.